Hello, everyone. For the next 20 or so minutes, we will be discussing the wonderful art form of social engineering. So welcome to Painting the Mona Social Lisa. My name is Danielle Alexander, and I am a threat analyst at Bechtel. When I am not by my keyboard, though, I'd like to think that I have a few things in common with the ladies on our screen. I imagine Mona Lisa enjoying the Italian countryside, as I really hope to someday. And I've been known to host tea parties. Let's start diving into the masterpiece that is social engineering. It is this impeccable craft based on technique, imagination, practice, research, and emotion. With art as our backdrop today, we must understand all of these brushstrokes that make up social engineering. We have this palette of descriptive words in front of us that really encompass the complexity of social engineering. The words on our left, these are very positive descriptors, and they become the mask of the social engineer. If we were to peel back the facade of social engineering, we have the words on the right, which are these very contrasting negative terms. And that last one, fraudulent, that pretty much will sum everything up. Social engineers want to lure you in with something that's friendly and nice and make you believe that what you see is what you get. However, that's not always the case. Now, unbeknownst to him, Edgar Degas exposed social engineering over 100 years ago. The piece in front of you is The Star, and we're immediately captivated by this gorgeous ballerina performing for us center stage. Her fluid movement, her elegant lines, this detailed costume, they all make up an end product that we are meant to see. When we expand our focus, we see that Degas included what happened beyond the scenes, in the theater wings. And we can see other dancers, other key pieces, such as maybe a financer or a set designer, a costumer. And just as in art, illusions are crafted by social engineers who only want to show you this masterful performance and spare you all of the nitty-gritty of what's actually happening and how they actually came to be. In sticking with our art theme, on the color wheel of life, you are the most important primary color. Nothing happens without you. And that emphasis is always on you. You represent the artist's hopes and dreams. And it's important to note that the right mix of words and images can be a very powerful tool today. Words and images, they do what? They spark emotion, and emotion usually turns into a reaction. The perfect performance can make you either do something or say something, maybe believe something that you normally wouldn't. While their stories may be elaborate, and social engineers, they get pretty creative and pretty imaginative, their template is actually very simple and straightforward. As we can see here, the only requirement is to make the fraud tailored to you. The IC3, or the Internet Complaint Center, they publish an annual report that covers many different crime types. And in the 2020 report, which we have pieces of here, business email compromise, or BEC, that might be more familiar to you, led the category of crime by financial loss. That figure was close to an unimaginable $1.9 billion. Let that sink in for a second. And the crime type with the most victims was phishing, vishing, smishing, and farming. Social engineering exists in all of these, and we're going to examine today just how they're woven in to some of these. But first here, just a really quick mention on motivations for these types of cyber crimes. The social engineer, they may be after financial gain, as we can see with that $1.9 billion price tag. Or potentially they're motivated by cyber espionage. They're looking to just ascertain as much sensitive information or private proprietary information as possible about their target. Or even they might be motivated by something even more nefarious, either disruption or destruction. So welcome to our museum for today, our Museum of Social Engineering, where we will explore 4 art installations of my choosing. We're going to look at phishing, smishing, vishing, and socialing. Now, if you asked yourself if socialing was a real word and did she really just make up a word in her presentation, I totally did, because socialing is a great representation for social media. We're going to touch on that as well. Our goal today is to walk through scenarios and identify tips for our users. The best way to fight social engineering is making sure that our users are trained to spot it and know how to report it. We will start with phishing because that is most certainly the famous one of the group, and we've probably all experienced it before. In this example here, we have an email from Paul Cezanne, or at least that's who we think it is, because that's what the sender wants us to see. We should not take this email on face value. That's a spoiler alert here. The from field, we see a name that we recognize, so that's a great start. And the author has personalized the message to us, so we believe that it's landed on the right lap. This is meant for us. And the request has financial implications. Ooh, so that's going to be a little dangerous, and that really implies that it's something important. What is hiding behind this message, though? Well, we can never truly trust a from field because those can be manipulated. If we were in our email client and we hovered over the sender address, we'd likely see a different address, and that would be the real sender. It'd be the same if we were to analyze the email headers. We probably would see a different return path. The customization, that's a standard sales technique. The social engineer has, at this point, performed reconnaissance on us, and they know what our LinkedIn page looks like, any social media posts, maybe publications that we've been a part of. They've done their research and they know who we are. The request. So that is not accompanied by a malicious link in this instance. And it won't be picked up by any antivirus alert. It's just a benign email with some malicious motives. But if we believe it and we act on it, we will be replacing Paul's real banking details with an actor-controlled bank account. And then poor Paul won't get paid for his hard work. Next, we have smishing, which is the fancy word for text messaging. Texting is great. It has been a revolutionary tool for all of us in our personal lives and for the social engineers. They love it because they can reach us any time of day, any day of the week, and certainly any location, as long as we have our phones with us, and we usually do. On our screen is a sample smish. We have someone texting us claiming to be our manager, Claude Monet. First, the sender is an unknown number, but if you see here, they state who they are and they explain why we wouldn't recognize the number. They're on their cell phone. Now, in the real world context, this isn't too far-fetched. We could believe that it's Claude's cell phone because, in the pandemic, it changed things and it definitely motivated a more work from home culture. So it's very likely that somebody would be trying to get in touch with us via cell phone instead of just walking down the hall or on a work phone. And two, we are invited to play a part in something that's very generous and a very thoughtful gesture for our hardworking coworkers. Now, I want to pause here because if you notice at the top of this sample Smish, you actually see Claude's name in the contacts field. And that's a bit of my deception here because when that text came in, it was an unknown number. But we believed the text. We believed that it really was Claude explaining this was his cell phone. And so we would have already saved his number for future phone calls or text messages, which means we now have an adversary, a bad actor that's saved in our phone under the name of somebody that we know and trust, which means this text aside, we could potentially be opening the door for future smishing directed at us, or maybe even potentially us contacting the fake Claude with sensitive information that an unauthorized person shouldn't see. In texting here, in smishing, we are being deceived in this manner that really removes a spontaneous voice interaction. The texter doesn't need to sound like our boss. They don't need to look like our boss. And texting, it really removes the potential for catching someone off guard. Smartphones have also been wonderful, but they have not been kind to us in certain areas. So a bad actor here, they may be, could have sent us a malicious link instead of this text message, asking us to click on a document to share with our colleagues. And by clicking that link, maybe it would ask for us to submit our credentials. And if we're on a personal phone and we're off network, then our security team really wouldn't know anything is happening. And unfortunately, unless our user realized something was suspicious and reported it, or we as a security team started to see malicious activity around that user, then we really don't know what to look for and how to act on it in a timely manner. And we can't talk about smishing without addressing vishing, which is a good old-fashioned phone call. Unlike smishing, though, vishing requires someone with a more seasoned affinity for theater. Before you is an imagined transcript of a vishing call that occurs later in the day when most of our colleagues are already off work. The caller is friendly and engages in small chit-chat. They don't just jump right to the request. He introduces himself as Henry Matisse, a private art buyer. And he warms to us by claiming that he's worked with our company before. At this point, we're a bit flattered. We maybe start to feel comfortable with the person on the other end of the line. And next, the caller name drops a colleague that he has supposedly worked with before. But since he probably researched that employee's work schedule and knows that she's not around to validate him, he felt comfortable calling and engaging us. Enter the urgent plea for help and this request to know which pieces of art are in stock. Taking it one step further, the caller would nicely ask us to remind him where the pieces of art ship from, because he uses his own logistics firm to pick up the art. Our social engineer here has donned the entirely nice and friendly mask and said all of the right things to make us believe that this is a customer trying to do business with us. And he also adds a little bit of drama by calling in late and implying urgency. Obviously here, we have to engage with prospective or returning customers. But a simple question about where the valuable pieces of art are stored, well, that could lead to us giving up the exact location, maybe even security protocols for when visiting the site. And that could have some very, very tragic implications here. Potentially a physical heist might be the end game. And now we've come to socialing, that made up word. So social media being used to carry out a fraudulent scheme. And yes, social engineering is very present here as well. Most everyone has a social media account, and social media profiles and platforms, they're all about connecting with people. So it becomes a growing point of concern for security teams. Social media profiles have public attention, and what we publish might end up on a social engineer's reconnaissance homework. So besides public posts, what do social media accounts have? They have private messaging. We can have full conversations with other users and no one else can see, which means no one can yell, "Stop," and warn us that we're engaging with a social engineer and potentially going down a fraudulent path. Social engineers, they love social media because it's really the ultimate canvas to create this fabricated web presence. And social engineers create multiple profiles across all major platforms to look and feel even more authentic. Here we have Patty Pallett, and she is private messaging us on our personal social media page. She says that she's a new hire at the company we work for. She even name drops our boss. Plus, she plays that urgent card by stating that technology issues are preventing her from doing an important task. There's a lot of emotion behind this one. With the presented information from Patty, we have a decision to make. Do we help this new colleague perform the task so she doesn't get in trouble? And then we have to anticipate our actions might be helping our boss, because if this is a really important report that needs to go out, we don't want to hinder that. But it's suspicious that we're being contacted on our social media page, and maybe we should ignore it. Maybe we should report it to our security team. Smishing, vishing, and socialing all have visibility gaps for a security team. Users are going to be their own best first line of defense against social engineering. We have to prepare them to spot the dangers and empower them to know how to spot them. To take us out of our imaginary scenarios, there was a very real news story over the summer that you may have read about, and it incorporated social engineering into a cyber espionage campaign using social media profiles. Fake Facebook profiles were created by threat actors. The various personas presented themselves as journalists, reporters, fellow employees of their targets, and even a friendly aerobics instructor. Now, the first two professions, we have journalism and recruiting. Those are great covers because journalists and recruiters have to connect with people that they do not know. It is part of their job to form relationships, ask questions of strangers. So it wouldn't be terribly odd to see a recruiter or a journalist pop into your social media profile. And seeing your company name listed as the employer of a new connection, that also lends a sense of initial trust. You're thinking that this is somebody that maybe you just haven't met yet at your company, and it'd be nice to connect with them. If we dial in, though, on this friendly aerobics instructor, that profile got a lot of attention. The persona was nice, she was sweet, maybe a bit flirty, and the social engineer behind that mask really took their time building up the online relationship. I believe it took almost 2 years before the persona enacted the second half of their scheme, which involved sending private messages or emails laced with malware that would scan the target's machine and steal data, hence the cyber espionage. So with that, we have seen how social engineering is intimately connected to all things phishing. And we can remind our users about the 5 W's from school. If we tweak them to our use case, they're still really relevant. We have who is asking me to do something, what is being asked of me, When am I supposed to act? So is it urgent? Is there time sensitive? Where is the request being made? That would be relevant to, is it a social media, a phone call, a text message? And why am I being contacted? Every scheme has a script. It is art, after all. The social engineer knows who they need to be, where they need to be from, and what they need to ask. Our users can be educated to be more comfortable with the types of backstories that they may hear. If not already doing so, ask your users to report fraud and track the data so you have real relevant scenarios to weave into your user awareness training and phishing drills. You might as well use the content that's already being subjected to your users and that's specific to your users. And here are some just initial potential backstories. Of course, there are a lot more, but as we've seen today, we have the person claiming to be a new hire. We have the person experiencing technology issues and email access issues. We have the name dropper, somebody that knows who bears weight in a company and how far that name can take them. And then we have the urgent request. So that fear tactic. I spent a lot of time describing the nicety and how somebody can be really friendly. But there is the social engineer that goes straight for inflicting fear upon their target to get them to act. And then don't ignore the sales call. So someone might be claiming to sell you a product, but they might just be using that as a disguise to ask some very intrusive questions that can either profile you, your company, or the technology your company uses. And that could lead to exposing vulnerabilities. Overly engaging the social engineer is not recommended, but our users, they need to engage enough to collect the facts and make that determination if the communication is authentic. Users can ask the person contacting them for their name, the company they're affiliated with, their contact information. So ask for their phone number and their email address to, potentially get back to them. If it's a call or a text that just doesn't feel right, you are not obligated to respond. You can always say you need to get back to them. And in the meantime, you can push all of the collected information to your security team, who can do a bit more research and potentially uncover if other users are reporting the same, which might mean that your company is being targeted on a much broader scope. And lastly, we can provide some tips for internal questions that our users can ask ourselves when assessing a situation. So just to go over these really fast, if a caller or a texter is claiming to be a colleague of ours, we maybe could think to ourselves, is this person really in our directory? Should I quickly look them up? And you can ask why you're being contacted by the selected medium. Does it make sense that I'm being asked to do something on this channel? If the caller does not have email access, watch out for the ploy that says they are trying to send an urgent report via email and they need email addresses. Because if they don't have access to their email, then they really can't be sending an email, right? And am I being asked to do something outside of my normal duties? A banking request, gift card purchasing. Is this stuff that I would normally work on? And lastly, if being contacted on social media, do I have shared connections with this profile? And if you do, well, then you can ask yourself, do the shared connections that I know in real life and that I've worked with before, do they know this person or maybe have a little bit more backstory on who they are and why they're connecting? So with that, we've come to the end of Painting the Mona Social Lisa. It's a very brief overview of social engineering in the modern age. And I wish I could talk for more about this, but I hope that I was able to provide a few helpful insights and highlights of social engineering that you can take back for your user awareness trainings. And let me try to find the comments here. If there's any questions. Let's see. What is phishing? Yes, so the phishing would be the voice phishing. So that would be your phone calls. And smishing is just the playful name for SMS or text messaging. So they got pretty playful. That's why I went with socialing for social media. I thought that was a cute way to carry on the trend. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Hit me up in the chats if you want to talk more about social engineering.